problems occur in about 20% of babies. So usually, half of that will only require some lactation support. Maybe it's just, a better position you need to get into. The other half can sometimes need intervention. So, maybe they need some body work, some chiropractic care, or maybe they have a tongue tie and need to have that released. So, during this time, if you are having trouble latching, this is where you're going to start pumping, because it is going to be a helpful tool to make it easier for your baby to transition back to breast. Pumping can help relieve engorgement. So engorgement, if you haven't taken our breastfeeding basics class, is basically when your milk is transitioning, usually around day 3 to 5 after your baby's born. And this is where you have most likely some excess fluids, increased blood flow, and then milk, and they're all fighting for the same space in your breast. So it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And so pumping can help relieve that engorgement. You can also try ice packs, or just allowing some time to pass. But sometimes it can be hard. Let's say, you feed your baby, but you're not feeding again for another 2 hours. Sometimes you have to kind of take the edge off in between those feedings. And so this is where we would recommend some pumping. And then pumping can allow other family members or loved ones to join in feeding your baby. So it can be a lot of extra work, just to get those bottles ready for you to pump. So we don't recommend it just for like a bonding experience. There are so many other things that, someone can do to bond with your baby. But certainly in the event that you maybe need a little bit more sleep, then, pumping is a way that someone else can feed your baby. It can also help increase your milk supply if your milk supply is low. So more stimulation to your breast, and then like you're emptying your breast more frequently, then the more milk you're going to make. So there could be a ton of reasons why your milk supply is low. It's really important to maintain what you have while you're working closely with a lactation consultant, and pumping to help increase your supply. We usually say that pumping itself is one of the best ways to increase your supply. Basically, a baby's unpredictable in the amounts that they'll take at breast. So with a pump, you can always just, stimulate and empty your breast if needed. And then pumping is sometimes essential when going back to work. So we go back to work pretty early here in the United States. So it is something that is going to have to happen if you are trying to provide breast milk once you're going back to work. So if it is just temporary, like a temporary separation, you may not have to pump, but certainly if you are going back for, longer days, then yes, you would definitely have to start pumping. So when is a good time to start pumping with a newborn? So I do want to address, I know quite a few people asked in the chat, when I asked the burning question, and I don't think we cover it in here. I know we cover it in other classes, but can you pump before the baby comes? And our answer to that is always, we want you to wait until you get the go ahead from your provider. Any sort of breast stimulation can cause preterm labor. So sometimes your doctors may recommend it after 37 weeks if you're trying to induce labor, but we would never recommend it beforehand. If you're leaking, then certainly you can collect the milk somehow, but we would not want you to start pumping, just because we don't want to risk your baby coming earlier than they need to. So when are you going to start pumping with a newborn? So if something comes up, if there's some sort of challenge when it comes down to your, breastfeeding relationship, maybe there's some latch problems, or there's, separation after birth, a lactation consultant may recommend that you start pumping right away, or as soon as possible after your baby is born. It is recommended to wait until breastfeeding has been well established before introducing pumping. So, certainly there may be times, like I said, if there's a challenge, then you are welcome to start pumping before that. You usually be working really close to the lactation consultant at that point. But if not, if everything is going well, we want you to kind of find your groove with breastfeeding and then start introducing a pump. Usually that looks to be about 4 to 6 weeks. And this depends too on when you're heading back to work. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, this looks differently for everybody. Um, if you do have limited maternity leave and you wish to start storing milk by introducing early pumping, we want you to start slow. In those first, 4 to 6 weeks, you're still establishing your milk supply. And so we don't want to overdo it because, although an oversupply sounds lovely, it usually comes with more harm than good. So we want you to start slow. And many moms find that just 10 minutes of pumping per day is enough to get their milk stash off to a good start, especially if you're heading back to work earlier. You want to really rely on your lactation consultant for guidance to know when is the right time for your family to start pumping. So like I recommended, if, right after birth, you're having trouble, baby's having trouble latching, or there's a separation after birth, then certainly you can start pumping pretty soon after. But if not, then we want you to wait. We want you to hold off until that 4 to 6 week mark, or at least until you sort of found your groove with breastfeeding and things are going well, and then you can start introducing a pump. Just some things to consider. So if breastfeeding is going well, but you choose to pump anyway for others to feed your baby, pumping could actually take twice the time to feed your baby. So the amount of time it took you to pump and the amount of time it's going to take you to have someone else feed your baby. Plus, you got to clean everything and store milk too if there's any extra. Pumping can increase the chances of clogged ducts, mastitis, milk supply overproduction, and breast abscesses. So this is true for all pumps. It does not matter if it's electric, manual, like the collection or passive pump, so like a Haka. This can cause, that's true for all of that. Pumped milk has reduced vitamins, minerals, and other important components when exposed to air, sunlight, and freezing temperatures. I always try to tread lightly when it comes to this because certainly, directly from the breast is ideal, but as someone who exclusively pumped, my daughter did just fine by getting pumped milk. And in my mind, it was, better than offering other things. So even if it did have reduced vitamins and minerals and things like that, she was still getting the best for her at that time. So truly, anytime pump milk is exposed to either air, sunlight, or freezing temps, a little bit of that does kind of break down. And so it does sort of change the composition of the milk a little bit. Some pumps or many pumps require you to be stationary while pumping. This is a little bit different. We have a ton of different options out there now, but a lot of the pumps that are out on the market, you can't, they have to be plugged into a wall. So you do have to be stationary. Truly, sometimes moms just don't respond well to breast pumps. They can cause pain, although pumping should not be painful at all. And you can produce less milk than the baby would. Your baby is always going to be far more efficient than a pump will ever be. More time is required to clean pump parts for next use. It is a lot of work to clean all of the parts, all of the bottle parts, all of the pump parts. It is not the most fun thing to do. If you are exclusively pumping, so this is meaning that you're only pumping, there's no direct breastfeeding, a mom's body can miss cues given to her from the baby when the baby directly breastfeeds. So this can kind of reduce that immunological response where mom's milk is customized to baby's medical needs. So our bodies sort of read the saliva that our babies pass to us and create this response to that. So if we're sick or we're getting sick, our bodies are designed to sort of give our babies some of those immune properties to make sure that they don't get sick, or it kind of lessens the blow in a sense. Also, if our baby's sick, then our bodies will kind of read that and give them the milk that they need to kind of get over that as well. If you are exclusively pumping, a strict schedule is needed to maintain a supply. Our milk varies in composition from time of day. So, in the morning, our milk composition is different than later on in the afternoon or the evening. So feeding that milk at different times throughout the day can certainly disrupt your baby's circadian rhythms. Also, the milk protective components vary by your exposure to pathogens, or even if you are sick. So, like I just mentioned, if you're storing that milk, then how are we going to know? You know what I mean? Like, we may have to label it like, oh, I had a cold this day. Whereas we kind of want the baby to get that, in real time in a sense. So that way we are able to help them fight off whatever it may be. I went through all of this. Sorry, guys. I get excited and I just talk and forget to change the slide. All right, so hand expression. If you've taken any of our other classes, usually in our breastfeeding basics class, we do talk about hand expression. This is a highly effective way at removing milk. Hand expression can remove more milk or colostrum in the first 48 hours than a pump ever could. So usually in the hospital, we will have you hand express because you're going to see more than you would if you were hooked up to a pump. If a mom is experiencing low supply, hand expressing after pumping maximizes pumping output. And we do recommend it after every session. Then also, if you do happen to have mastitis, hand expression is more helpful than using a pump to help clear the infection. I do want to show you what this hand expression looks like. So typically we will massage the breast in all different areas. Our milk ducts are throughout our whole entire breast, so we're not going to neglect any of that. And then we are going to place our thumb and our pointer about, I don't know, I guess an inch or so back from the areola. That varies. We're going to press back towards the chest wall. We're going to compress and move our fingers forward a little bit and then release. So press, compress, release. From the side, press back towards that chest wall, compress. You can move your fingers together a little bit and then release. In the beginning, we are truly just looking for a glistening on the nipple. We're looking for some drops of colostrum. We're going to alternate breaths and we're going to move. So in this case, I had my hand in a C or a U. We're going to move that all over the breast. We're going to alternate our hands and our breasts because we have milk ducts, again, everywhere throughout our breast. So we want to make sure that we're pulling from all those different milk ducts. Again, this is the most efficient in that first 48 hours after delivery. Some moms will still do this after. Maybe they'll hand express before or after pumping because they feel as though their pump is not super efficient as well. Now we're going to dive into types of pumps. So I'm going to go through these and then I want to show you how to put them together. I apologize if we don't get to your pump here today. We usually just cover the most common ones, and I think I have most of them. If we don't get to them, just let me know, and I am happy to set up a one-on-one and go through any of them with you, or if we have time at the end of the class, I'm welcome. I can try to fit that in as well. I do not have hospital grade pumps, but these are double electric stationary breast pumps, and these are the hospital grade ones. So they are a closed system. They are the most efficient. Right now on the market, there's typically just the Medela Symphony. Sometimes hospitals will have an immediate version as well, but I think most hospitals are kind of moving away from that. These are great if you have a baby that's born premature, or maybe you do feel as though you have a low supply. These are something that you can get through your insurance, or you can rent through your hospital. And it is just a rental type program. So you typically cannot buy these. You'd have to rent them for a specific amount of time. So then the double electric stationary breast pumps that are personal grade. So we have the Spectra, the S1 or the S2. They're either pink or blue. It does not matter. It's not the gender of your baby. It's just the model. And then the Medela Pump and Style Max Flow. And then we have the Motif Luna, or the Luna with battery. Exactly the same pump. One just has the battery. One does a rechargeable battery. One does not. And then the Lansino Smart Pump 2.0. All right, and then I'm going to go through these with you so I can show you how they get put together. And then if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them in the chat as well. A lot of these pumps, I will tell you, so Just as an example, the Spectra, all of their pumps have the same flanges. And so if yours is, a different version of it, then it would be the same. Sometimes things are a little bit different, but I can show you the ones that I do have, and then we can kind of go from there. So I'm going to start with the Spectra S1, and I'm going to show you guys how to go ahead and put that together. Right. Spectras are double electric pumps. And the front of your pump is a piece, oh gosh, that looks like this. I'm going to shut off my screen. You guys can pin me so you can see me. And then you'll be able to see everything as well. All right. So you can see here in the middle, you will see that there is one hole and one hole is covered. If you pop this off, this means that it is a double electric pump. This little piece is just designed to cover it if you are just single pumping. So I want to show you the parts that come with the Spectra, and I'm going to show you how to put it together. So you'll have bottles. A lot of times they may have the nipples attached to it, as if you're going to feed your baby, you're going to take that off. These are wide mouth bottles. You will have a piece of tubing, and then you will have a duckbill. And then these are the membranes, and these are typically already put together, but if not, they just pop closed. So with the flange, how we're going to put this together is that Spectra has a side that's too skinny and will not fit snugly into the back of the flange. And then there's a piece that's a little bit thicker and it fits in perfectly. You just kind of slide it in. So once that's in snug, that's perfect. We're going to put this duckbill onto the bottom. Make sure it's snug. You're going to give it a little tug. It usually stays in place. That means it's on. And then you will attach your bottle, make sure that's on perfectly. And then you're going to take one side of your tubing and connect it and just kind of slide it onto the back of the Spectra. The membranes go into your pump in the front here as well. And you're just going to make sure that it is in snugly. In the event that you're pumping both breasts, you'd have the other tubing and the other parts coming from here. If you were only pumping one breast at a time, you would just close this off. And then you'd be pumping on one side. So this is the same for all of the Spectras. This is how you'd put it together. And then we're going to move on to the Motif Luna, which is very much the same as the Spectra. Actually, all of their parts are interchangeable, so that is something to think about as well. So with the Motif, oops, dropping things left and right over here. Grab a bottle. So when they come with the nipples already attached. You're just going to slide this off. So you have your bottle. Same thing, you have your duckbill that came out of the bottom over here. You have your membranes, and then you have your flange. So very similar to the Spectra, only this one has it's like a little edge or a little lip on it, and only one side is going to fit snugly into the back of your flange. So that goes like that. Again, your duckbill is going to go right underneath. This one doesn't fit as snug. And then you're going to attach your bottle. And then your tubing is going to go right in the back here. Sometimes the tubing can be a little bit hard to get on. You kind of have to really push it on. And then it will go into the front of your pump. So again, this is a double pump. There is one side that is blocked off. I'm going to slide this tubing onto there and it would connect like that. And that means that you are good to go for that. Next up, I will show you the Lantino Smart Pump. Lantino is a little bit unique in that it only has one whole tube here, but it does have another piece that can kind of come off, so they all have to connect. So with the Lantino, you will have your bottle. You will have a duckbill, but it's really tiny, so it's not interchangeable with anything. You'll have your flange, which comes off like this. You will have your tubing. I'll show you that in a second. And then your membranes are actually at the top. And there's a piece of silicone here. It can come off. It has to go on specifically the way that it comes off, but it's pretty self-explanatory because it has like these lips here, so it has to line up perfectly. And then you put this on and you twist, and then it's on. So for this, you would attach the duckbill underneath. You would attach the bottle. You'd put your flange into here. And then you're going to put your tubing into the side or the back, depending on how you put it on. I put it on to the side. With this one, it does make a Y. So if you're single pumping, you have to block off. There's a little piece right here. And so you have to block this part off. So if you were double pumping, you'd have a piece of tubing that would come out the side. In this case, it would be single pumping. So we're going to block that off. And then there's a piece that goes like this, and it goes right into the purple side of your pump. And that is how that one turns on. So this is the Lansinoh. And then for the Medela, I have the Medela here. I just want to make sure because I have a couple pumps in the same box. I want to make sure I have the correct one. All right. Yes. Perfect. All right. So the Medela will come with a Y attachment. So all of your tubing is connected. I do want to show you. So the bottle is a narrow neck bottle, and there's no duckbill in this. So you can see your flanges, they either have the soft shell ones, so they're like the flex fit, or they have harder ones as well. So that is your flange. And then your membranes are in the back of this piece. So if you squeeze the sides, they will open up. And then here you'll have your membranes in here. Again, there's only really one way to put these in. You'll see that it has to go in a specific way. And then you will click it on. You will attach your flange. You will attach your bottle. Screw that in. And then for the tubing, it is a Y. So you can see here, this makes a Y. If you are single pumping, there is a hole in the top, and you'd put that right in there. And then you're going to take and attach the back of this. There's a hole at the bottom here, and you're going to put that right in there. And then this will go directly onto your pump here. It's going to go right into here. And that is how you're going to connect all of it. I don't have the Amita Maya Joy with me, but I'm happy to, if you email me, I can send you what I have about that, or I can set something up. I just don't have that one with me. I know they created a new one, so I just don't have that one with me tonight. So that's how you put all of those together. I do want to talk about the portable breast pump. So, you know, a manual breast pump, we would typically recommend the Medela Harmony. I want to grab that one really quickly. So this one is going to look a little bit different. So it has this duckbill under here, or the membranes, the valve here. And this is a totally different piece, but the bottle would screw on here. And as you can see, this just looks a little bit different. If you were using your electric pump, you could put your tubing right into the top here. But in this case, we're using it as a hand pump. So we're going to just put that in like this. And then you would pump quickly to get that let down. And then you would do the longer pulls once you have gotten that let down. I love having a manual pump. I say add it to your registry if you haven't already. It's sort of a lifesaver. Keep it in, you know, your diaper bag, keep it in your car. It's one of those things where you never know you're going to need it until you need it. If you are in an area where you lose power pretty frequently, that's something to think about. It would, you know, especially if you're pumping more frequently, it would be a great idea to have that manual pump. Some people respond better to a manual pump, honestly, than an electric pump. So it's great to have it on hand. And then also talking about like the silicone or bulb. So that is typically like your Haka style. These are truly considered pumps. So just keep that in mind. I'm just searching for my bins of pumps. There, you guys. So these are truly considered pumps once they are pushed back and they are squeezed and then on. They will draw out milk and you can compress them and pull out the milk. So I always say to be careful with these because, you know, I do see a lot of parents creating an oversupply, which does cause more harm than good because they are obsessed with trying to get more milk. And so they're using these when they really don't need to. There's other ways to kind of catch that milk that drips on the other side. And I can talk about that when we talk about accessories. So then there's other portable breast pumps that are also electric. So there's the Medela Freestyle, the Motif Duo, and the LV Stride. So I can kind of talk about these quickly as well. I'm going to start with the Medela. So super tiny, very similar to the other one that I just showed you. All of the tubing is, or all of the parts are exactly the same. So the only difference is the tubing, and it just has a different shape. It has a triangle piece that goes into the bottom instead of a round piece. So all of the parts are exactly the same as the Pump and Style, the Max Flow. So the Medela Freestyle, all of these are sort of interchangeable. Then there's the Motif Duo. And I think they just redesigned this. So it may look a little bit different, but this one's super small. If you have this, I will show you how to put that together as well. So you have your bottle, wide neck bottle. You have your duckbill in here. So it does look a little bit different than the other ones. It's not as large as the Spectra, but also not as small as the Lancino. You have your flanges that go right into here, and then you have your membranes on the top. And this is how this goes in. Again, one side is smaller than the other, so you'd have to find the side that fits the best, fits snug. You're going to pop that membrane into the bottom. You're going to put your bottle on, attach your flange, and then your tubing will go into the bottom here. So there's a little hole in the bottom. Again, it is double, so you'd have to make sure that you open up both sides. And it has a little white piece on the top, and that piece fits snugly to the top of the flange. And that is how you connect your Motif Duo. The other one we're going to talk about is the LV Stride. A lot of people are loving this one, so if you have it, that's great. I will say that there is quite a learning curve with this one, but this is the pump itself, and then you will have your piece that attaches here, so it does twist out. So this is like the cup part. This is your flange is right in here. You do have a duckbill in the bottom here. It's really hard to see because it's kind of small. You can pull that out and then it pops right back in. And then these are sort of like your membranes. You can peel these off and then they go right back on. This part will fit snugly in here. You can kind of hear the air come out when you put it on. Just be mindful that you want to empty all of your milk out from the top here before you pull that apart, because as you can see, once you pull it apart, this whole part comes out. So your milk is typically in here and you're going to have milk everywhere. So just make sure you pour it out before you pull it apart. From there, there's these little pieces here. They attach, they're like almost like magnetic, and they pop in. And then from there, you have your piece that comes down here and it pops right into the bottom of your pump. And that's your LV. The flange is right in here. There's lines to line up your nipple there. There's definitely a learning curve with that one, so just keep that in mind. And then for your wearable pumps, there's either the LV or the Willow. I have an LV here, so I can show you. In this case, we have the bottle that pops down. We have sort of your duckbill here that slides in, and there's a plastic piece right here that twists off. That's how the milk is stored. Again, these can only go on one way, so you'll know if it's on incorrectly. From there, you have your flange piece that sits right in here, and then you also have your membranes as well. So this pops out, and then from there, there's your membranes in the top as well. These are wearable. Again, there's a learning curve with this. So this is your flange. And then these are your membranes. They sit on the top. This slides right in. You'll hear it click. And then in this case, you'll have your bottle and it'll click right in there. So that is how you would assemble the Elvie. The Willow is pretty similar, only there is a bag system as well that goes with that. All right, so now we learned how to sort of put these all together. We're going to talk about how do you use it. So there are no magic numbers. I get asked this all the time, like, oh, well, should I put it on? Like, can you tell me what level or what, section or how should I put it on? So I can tell you, there are no, set like perfect settings. It varies based on you. What we want to do is we want your pumping to mimic your baby's feeding patterns. So you want these two phases that I'm going to talk about in a second to happen during your pumping session. So with that, there is, you want to start initially with a light vacuum, but with a rapid cycle. So you're going to increase that cycle speed if you can. The reason for that is that when a baby latches onto the breast, they typically have a lighter suction, but they're going to suck more frequently. Most of your pumps will do this. Well, not most of your pumps. So some of your pumps will do this on their own for 2 minutes. So like Medela will have a timer or it'll switch over after 2 minutes. Spectra and Motif will not switch over, but it does have a timer so you can keep track of that. What we say is that you want to do this for at least 2 minutes in the beginning or when your milk begins to flow. I will tell you that with your Spectra, when you turn it on, it is not in that cycle. So you have to hit, we call it the bacon button. It just looks like a wave. Or we call it like bacon, and I shut my thing off again. But the bacon button is, oh gosh, right at the top here. And it just looks like 3 little lines. And you're going to hit that as soon as you turn your pump on. So that way you are able to get into that light vacuum with the rapid cycles. And then from there, once you notice that your milk is either spraying, or dripping rapidly, then you can switch it over to that more stronger vacuum with the slower cycles to finish off your session. This is going to look like 15 to 20 minutes or until your milk really begins to slow down to just drops. Honestly, not everyone's going to follow this exact pattern. We want you to kind of experiment and find out what works best for you. Sometimes people will, put that light vacuum on, get that let down, do that stronger vacuum for, maybe 10 minutes and then go back and try to get another let down by hitting that button again. So this is going to look differently for everybody. Most of the electric breast pumps will have multiple settings. So that's going to include like your cycle, so the sucks per minute, and the vacuum, which is the suction level. So these are the pumps that are automatically going to change from letdown or massage mode to expression mode for you. So the Medela Max Flow, the Medela Sonata, the Lansino Smart Pump, the Medela Freestyle Flex, the Motif Duo, the Willow, Elvie, and Elvie Stride. So all of these are going to automatically change from that letdown or massage mode to expression mode for you, meaning they will do that automatically at 2 minutes, whether or not you've gotten to that point. You're always welcome to change it before you get to that point, but those are the pumps that will do it for you. There are certain pumps that will allow you to adjust the cycles and the vacuum modes independently. And so that is going to be your Motif Luna and the Luna Plus, and then your Spectra S1 and S2. So basically this means that like, If you want a light suction, but a frequent cycle of suction all the way through without ever having to change that, you can make that adjustment. So it's not just turn it on, and if you increase, if you turn the dial or press the plus button, that it's going to increase the cycle speed and the suction. This is, you have the ability to do it, independently. You're going to play around and find what works for you. We do recommend that you pump through at least one letdown, but certainly more than one letdown. Incorporate hands-on pumping. So hands-on pumping is going to look like gentle breast massage while you're pumping, kind of pushing that milk towards the flange. In the resources document that we give you, there is an article in a video on what hands-on pumping looks like. So you'll be able to see that. So what does a pumping schedule look like? So research tells us that 120 minutes every 24 hours is needed on each breast, whether breastfeeding or pumping, to create a full milk supply. So if you are exclusively pumping, you're going to shoot for that 120 minutes. If you're breastfeeding, you're just going to assume that your baby's kind of doing what they need to do, but then certainly incorporating that pumping if your baby is not coming to breast as often. And then the frequency of milk removal. So newborns will typically need to feed at the breast or by bottle no less than 8 times in a 24-hour period. I will tell you that most newborns will feed upwards of like 10 to 12, but certainly no less than 8 times every 24 hours. If your baby is ever feeding from a bottle for feeding, you should be pumping at that time. This is probably the most common thing I see happen, is that we assume that when a baby is getting a bottle, that like, oh good, like I've gotten a break, I can get some extra sleep, or I can do this. But it is super important, if you're wanting to maintain your milk supply or create your milk supply, that you are pumping anytime your baby is being fed anywhere or any other way than at the breast. It does not have to be that like exact time, but we need to make sure that we get a full pumping in its place. And then how long? So typically sessions, we say we want you to only pump for about 15 to 20 minutes. There's no correlation between longer pumping sessions and more milk. So it does not necessarily mean that you're going to get more milk if you're pumping for 30, 40 minutes. You're just sitting there pumping for 30 to 40 minutes. Let's see. If for some reason your lactation consultant said you need to pump a certain number of ounces and you achieve that before the end of your 15 to 20 minutes, you can stop. So sometimes, we see parents that are able to get decent amounts in 5 or 10 minutes. You can certainly stop. You do not have to pump for that full 15 to 20 minutes at each breast. All right. And then power pumping. So sometimes we will recommend that you power pump. It is our way, meaning, lactation consultants' way of trying to get you to increase your milk supply. This is sometimes if it's perceived that you have a low milk supply, or maybe there's like a dip. Sometimes like if we get sick or, your period is starting to return, then we can see a dip in your milk supply. We would recommend power pumping. So what does this look like? Typically it is 60 minutes, so 1 full hour of your time. We recommend doing it once a day. And this is pumping for 20 minutes, resting for 10 minutes, pumping for 10 minutes, resting for 10 minutes, pumping for 10 minutes, and then done. And we typically see the results of this power pumping usually in about 2 to 3 days. So we're going to see that increase in your milk. We don't encourage you to power pump unless you need to. So we usually would say we want you to start, we want you to talk with the lactation consultant before you start power pumping, because if you don't need to, then there's, really no reason to, and it can cause more harm than good. All right. So how to clean your pump parts. So before each use, you want to make sure that you wash your hands first, and then you want to assemble your clean pump kits and then clean the pumping area. So you want to make sure that wherever you're pumping is sort of sanitary, and make sure that all your pump parts are clean. After, before, so once you get your new pump, we do recommend that you sanitize or clean all of those pump parts before the first use. So we don't want you to take it out of the box and just start using it. We want you to clean those, and I will talk about how to clean those in a second. So after each use, so after you are done pumping, you want to store your milk safely. So we always say do this first so that way you do not spill any of your milk. That should be your top priority. We want you to label the milk container with a date and any new medication. So really anything new, or maybe you tried a new food or something like that. We want you to put that on there, or maybe you started taking a new vitamin or something. Anything that you've done differently in the last 24 hours, we want you to label it because we want to make sure that it does not affect your baby. We want to have that record in case your baby has any sort of reaction to that milk. And then you want to clean the pumping area. So just kind of wipe it down. And then you want to, yeah, so clean that pumping area. Sometimes I used to keep like Clorox wipes with me so I could clean down wherever I was pumping. And then you want to disassemble and clean the pump kit. So you want to make a separate pile for all parts that come in contact with the breast milk. So not all parts within your, that you're pumping with need to be cleaned after every single time. So we don't recommend that you clean the tubing because we don't want to get it submerged. We don't want it to get wet. So you are going to hand wash after each use. So we want you to wash fully with soap and hot water and let everything air dry. So both the bottle, any of your pump parts, and any of the washing tools such as a bottle brush. I always recommend having a separate container. So like even like a bin or something like that. You never want to put, let's say, in this picture, she's at the sink, obviously. If you just made chicken for dinner and there's raw chicken in your sink and you throw your pump parts in, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you have a separate container to put all your pump parts in and clean within that container. So that way it's not coming in contact with anything else in your sink. There are some, you can sometimes use your dishwasher. So in some cases, you can just make sure that it is dishwasher safe. So you want to just check with your pump manufacturer just to make sure it is. If it is available, use a sanitized cycle, and then you want to use heat dry. There are like these little baskets you can buy to put all your small parts into, or a mesh bag on the top rack. You don't want to lose those little parts in the bottom of your dishwasher. If the parts are still wet after the dishwasher is done, you just want to lay them out on a clean towel or put them on one of the dryers so that way they have the ability to dry. We want to get all of that extra water out of those parts. You can certainly sanitize by boiling water or steam daily. They make little steam bags too. So Medela makes them, Munchkin makes them. I think there's a couple more out there, but you certainly want to do this if your baby is younger than 3 months, if your baby was born premature, or if your baby has a weakened immune system. For any of the parts that don't come into contact with the actual breast milk, like the machine, the tubing, you can certainly wipe them down if there's any milk on them. Like sometimes, maybe there's a drop or something like that, but you don't ever want to submerge them in water, especially those, the tubing, because it can harbor bacteria. And again, you want to make sure that before you use your pump for the first time, you want to wash and sanitize all of your pump parts. Your pumps are not returnable. So once they're delivered to you and you've accepted them, they are not returnable. So you want to get those parts out and start cleaning them in the event that you need to use your pump once your baby is home. I know typically there's a couple questions, so I'm going to try to address them here about, there's sort of like, I don't think it's a hack, but oftentimes they're saying like, oh, just store it in the fridge. They did say that at one point that was okay, but then they kind of came back and said no, just because we don't know what can be, what can harbor in that. So if we're just putting those parts in, you can certainly rinse them off really well and then wash them with that, especially if you're at work, you don't have to wash them with the soapy water every single time. If you're rinsing them off with really hot water, getting all like the excess milk out and then using it again in a couple hours, then yes, but you want to make sure that you are cleaning like thoroughly, hand washing or putting them in the dishwasher for a solid cleaning at the end of the day. That is really important. All right, and then replacing parts. So you want to look at your pump's manufacturer's instructions for when to replace them. Every single pump is different. But for most of the pumps, the soft silicone parts, so those duck bills, the membranes, those should be replaced every 2 to 3 months. And it really depends on how often you're using your pump. So if you are exclusively pumping, you're going to replace that sooner. But if not, then, every 2 to 3 months. And then if you notice that something is wrong and maybe your pump is not working as well, or if you notice that um, any of them become torn or damaged, you're going to replace those right away. The tubing, we recommend usually every 6 months or sooner if it's damaged. And then the typical recommendation for replacing any of the flanges or brush shields in the bottles is every 3 to 6 months. The good news is that many of your insurance plans will cover the replacement parts. So just ask. You guys all have breast pump specialists, which is who you got your pump through. So especially if you got your pump through Aeroflow, you want to call them, reach out to them and see what replacement parts are covered. So that way you don't have to take care of that. Most of the times, if say your insurance does not cover it, they are considered like, HSA. So you can certainly use that to, even breast milk bags, things like that. So just keep that in mind. All right, and then flange sizing. Your flanges that come with whatever pump you get, they are not necessarily the right size flanges for you. These flanges are not a one size fits all. So please keep that in mind. I can tell you that the incorrect flange sizing can lead to either like nipple trauma, a decreased milk output, certainly pain, things like that. So it is really important to make sure that your flanges are the correct fit. You're welcome to schedule a one-on-one session with me or Tana or any of our LCs to help with a flange fit. However, we usually want you to wait until at least 2 weeks postpartum, if possible, to measure. And we do have a nipple ruler that you guys will get. You'll have to print it out. It's in our resources list. And so you can self-assess yourself. But if not, then if you set up a one-on-one, we'll usually either ask you to show us during the visit or you're welcome to send us videos and we can take a look and make sure that it is the right size for you. But again, we need to wait until at least 2 weeks postpartum. Your breast and your nipples are going to change, during those 2 weeks. So another thing to think about is that you may need different flange sizes on each breast. So our breasts are different. And so you may need, a 19 on one side and a 24 on the other, or, whatever that looks like. So don't be alarmed if you do need different sizes. They can also change. The size that you may need can change throughout the postpartum period. So sometimes in the beginning, we may need a bigger flange size, but then as time goes on, we could need a smaller one. So it's important to kind of keep up with that and make sure that it's the right fit. You want to make sure that you're reassessing and then making sure that it is the right size periodically, just to make sure it's the best fit. Typically, we want you to measure the nipple itself before pumping. That's ideal. So we want to see what the nipple looks like inside the flange. Certainly, our nipples will expand a little bit when we're pumping and they will move. So we also consider that as well, because sometimes, our nipples could, touch the sides as the, maybe the pumping session goes on. Again, we have that nipple ruler. It is in our resources list. We do typically want you to wait until at least 2 weeks postpartum to measure, but you can take a look and see, just to kind of give you a general sense of where it would be, especially if you feel as though maybe your nipples are larger than most or smaller than most, then this is going to be a good way to know, so that if you do have to pump, you're not wasting your time or causing any damage or decrease in your supply if you're using the wrong size flange. And then pumping accessories. So again, most of these things are qualifying HSA or FSA purchases. So you can certainly take advantage of that. Some things that may be helpful for you would be like a hands-free pumping bra. Medela makes one that is specific for Medela. And then there's also like Lactamed, Simplicity, Bravado, Simple Wishes, Kindred. You can certainly just take a sports bra that's not super tight and cut holes in the middle. There's so many different ways to make this work. The idea is that you're creating a hands-free pumping experience, which typically means that you can use your hands to do breast massage. You can relax. You're not sitting there holding those flanges on. You can work. So you can sit at your computer and get, some work done. You can eat, you can talk on the phone, you can do all sorts of things without having to physically hold the flanges on. So it is a good idea to invest in that. Again, you don't want it to be super, super tight. You want to make sure that it's, the right size. Anything that's too tight can cause some plug ducts. So you want to make sure that even sometimes just size up a little bit. So that way you can make sure that it's the most comfortable fit. But these are a great option. You can certainly reach out to your breast pump specialist to see if that's something that's covered as well. But again, this is something that should be covered. If you do have an HSA or an FSA, it is a qualifying purchase. And then there are a ton of other things that you can get. I have obviously walked the aisles of Target or checked, on Amazon, and the amount of accessories that they have for breastfeeding or pumping is insane to me. You truly, most often when breastfeeding, just need your breasts. And then when pumping, like, you don't need a ton of things, but there are certainly things that will make your life a little bit easier. So with that, we don't typically recommend the massagers. So I know that they're out there, but they are no longer recommended by us. They are causing some damage to our breast tissue, which is it's very delicate. And so a lot of these massagers are being used too aggressively. So we no longer recommend them. You can certainly do some gentle massage with your hands, and that is going to be, effective as well. Hot and cold packs for engorgement. So these are the Lansino TheraPearls. I still have them. They are awesome. I actually buy them just because they can be hot or cold, and they're flexible. So those are a great option to have. You can certainly put it, on your breast when it's cold if you're having some engorgement. And then you can do some, warmth before you start pumping or breastfeeding, and that's helpful. Breast milk storage bags. There are so many different options. My favorite, honestly, was the Target Up and Up brand. But there are so many out there on the market. You are just going to find one that works for you. Maybe your insurance company, gives you some. So like, I know, for example, my insurance gave me the Amita ones. But breast milk storage bags are great. You can lay them flat to freeze, and you can certainly store quite a bit of milk in not a lot of space. And then let's see, there's also sometimes, like, it will come with a pump. The storage bags you can pump right into a bag. So Medela makes that, Amita makes one. There's the Kind system, or Spectra makes that as well. It's usually just a little plastic piece and it has hooks on it. It'll hook onto the bag. And then you can pump directly into that. So there's also the pump, store, and feed system. So you do not need an adapter for that. And that's going to be the Kind system. Spectra Simple Store as well. So those are a good option. Quick clean sanitizer bags or sterilizer bags. These are a game changer. Just buy them. They are awesome. You can literally sterilize anything or sanitize anything. I used to throw my kids' toys in here. I now sanitize Legos in them because my kids are a little bit older. But they are awesome to have, to not have to truly steam or boil. You just add a little bit of water into this bag and throw it in the microwave, and it will, you just put it in there and then it'll sanitize that for you. There are sometimes the breast pump cleaning solution wipes. So Medela makes them, or Dapple. You can certainly use those. They're great for kind of cleaning things on the go. Never use any sort of products that you would not want to touch your breast or your pump parts, or remember that this milk is being transferred to your baby. So you certainly don't want to, use Clorox wipes or anything like that. You just want to stick to the ones that are specifically designed for your breast pump. And then there's also the car adapter or battery pack. You want to make sure that you're using the one that is specific to your pump and that you get it through either like the manufacturer or you get one that is like truly for that. Just because if you use one that is not for that and you get like an off-name brand, then it does void the warranty. And then you want to make sure you have an extra set of pump parts. That's really important. Dogs love to chew flanges, so keep that in mind. And then you can also invest in like a portable cooler. Sometimes your pump, like your insurance will give you that. An insulated lunch bag. It does not have to be anything fancy. And then just a tote. So somewhere you can store all of these things. Some of your pumps will come with that, but then you can certainly use whatever is the most easiest for you. All right, so how do we store our breast milk? So it's really important. And it's important to talk to whoever is going to be feeding your baby. You want to make sure that they are aware of how to handle your breast milk so that way none of it is wasted or they're not feeding milk that is bad to your baby. The CDC does offer guidance for the safe handling and storage of breast milk. So you always want to make sure that your hands are clean before, pumping or preparing your breast milk. And then you want to follow the CDC's guidelines for washing or sanitizing your breast pump parts and collection containers. And then you want to only use containers that are intended for breast milk. You don't want to use any random stuff to store your breast milk unless you're really, really in a pinch. So freshly pumped milk can be stored at room temperature, which is 77 degrees or colder, for 4 hours, and that's in the fridge. And that's for up to 4 days. Sorry, so let's go back. Room temp, so 77 degrees or colder for 4 hours. In the fridge, which is 40 degrees or colder for 4 days. And then in the freezer, so 0 degrees or colder, and that's for 6 to 12 months. We say 6 months is best, but 12 months is certainly acceptable. If you have thawed or previously frozen milk, it can be stored at room temperature for 1 to 2 hours, in the fridge for up to 24 hours, and it should never be refrozen. So you never want to refreeze your breast milk. If you've taken it out, the baby doesn't use it, you have to get rid of it. It cannot be refrozen. We kind of go along with that first in, first out. So you want to thaw the oldest milk first. So and especially if your baby's smaller, you'll find that like the milk looks a little bit different. You want to use that milk first because a baby who's a little bit older is not going to be okay with taking milk from the beginning. They're going to be like, what is this and why does it taste different? You can thaw your milk in the refrigerator overnight in a container of lukewarm water or by running it under lukewarm water. Just a little bit of a tip from an exclusive pumper. The breast milk bags are great, but sometimes they have these really, really tiny holes in them, and we don't realize it until we submerged it into a container of lukewarm water, and then we notice that the water is looking a little milky, and then we have to toss that milk because we cannot risk that some of the milk did not travel back into that bag. So I always use a double bag method, meaning I had a specific like Ziploc bag that sat on the side and it was my milk thawing bag. It was labeled so nobody used it for anything else. And I would literally put that bag of milk in. I would get all the air out, seal it, kind of roll it up and submerge that into the water. So that way if any of the milk spilled, it spilled into that bag. And then I would just pour it in and then I would toss both bags and then start again. It saved me a lot of milk over my 13 months of pumping, because sometimes they do have these really tiny pinholes and we cannot see them until we start thawing our milk out. You never want to thaw in the microwave or in boiling water. It can get too hot, create hot spots, and burn your baby. And then milk left over from a feeding should be used within 2 hours. So this typically looks like you started feeding your baby fell asleep or started to maybe refuse the bottle. You have 2 hours to offer that bottle again. If your baby does not finish that or does not start feeding within that 2 hours, you have to toss that milk. It cannot go back in the fridge. It cannot be reheated and it cannot be refrozen. Some of the saliva does pass back through that bottle nipple. And so then it starts to harbor bacteria and we do not want that. So we need to toss it. Breast milk does not need to be warmed. It can be served cold or at room temperature. There is no need to buy a bottle warmer. They are just extra fancy and create really picky babies. So there's no need to have a bottle warmer. Again, babies will often take cold milk, room temperature milk, if you don't have a ton of time to, put it in, make it super warm because of like the temperature of the water. Honestly, babies will drink cold milk. And if we use a bottle warmer, then let's just say we're out and about and we don't have that bottle warmer with us and our baby will only take that milk at a specific temperature, then you're going to have a very upset baby because you did not have the right temperature milk and they could refuse the bottle. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then just a little bit of a pro tip. So the best pump on the market is your baby. So we always say, your baby's far more efficient than a pump will ever be. We never want to, say that, let's just say you got, 2 ounces out of, a pumping session. We can't guarantee that that's what your baby is getting. A lot of times babies are taking more or they're taking less than that, depending on the time of day, how much they ate at the last feeding. But truly, your baby is the best pump on the market. They're going to be the most efficient at the breast. I left myself 20 minutes today to go over some questions. So I know Tana has been typing away in the chat, but Tana, what questions can I go ahead and answer?
Can we talk a little bit about paced bottle feeding? There were a lot of questions about transitioning from breast to bottle. I mentioned that's the best way to approach it, but that you could dig in a little more on that.
Paced bottle feeding is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So what paced bottle feeding looks like, let me just go ahead and show you guys. We do have, I don't know if it's in this resource, but it is in some of our resources. So if you've taken another class, but typically with paced bottle feeding, so let's just say traditionally we hold a baby like this, and you would feed your baby with a bottle straight up and down like this. I can tell you this is a Dr. Brown's, the Preemie nipple. This is going to be the slowest flow nipple that is out there. And this will still drip milk. So anytime milk is dripping in the back of the baby's mouth, they're, naturally going to start sucking, whether or not they want it. So what we are instead doing, so they have no control over this. We're like, you just need to keep feeding and you're just going to keep sucking and swallowing until all of this milk is gone. They don't have the ability to stop. In paced bottle feeding, we hold our babies in a more upright position. And we want this bottle to be level. And the idea here is that we're gonna, put the bottle like this. We're gonna allow them to open their mouth really wide. They're gonna latch onto the bottom. From here, they're gonna do those sucks and they're gonna pause. When they pause, we're gonna tip that bottle down, give them a second and allow them to draw that bottle back in. With this, the feeding is gonna be a little bit slower. Babies are not chugging. They're not getting big gas bubbles. They are just, taking the time and really pacing themselves while they are feeding at the bottle. There's no such thing as nipple confusion, but there is flow preference. And so oftentimes what we see is when we start introducing bottles to babies, if they're fed like this milk is coming really fast. They do not have to work for this milk at all. So then why go to breast if they can get fed like this and taken, and not have to work for it? So then when babies come to breast, they're frustrated because they have to suck and get that milk to let down. And so it's not a nipple confusion, it's a flow preference. So we want to put our babies in a more upright position, even holding them upright like this in our arms, and then keeping that bottle sort of level. A lot of times the nipple won't be completely filled with milk. And I always hear, but what about the air? You're worse off having a baby like this and chugging and gulping than if they get a little bit of air this way. So that is the best way to do paced bottle feeding.
And I just put it in the chat, the resource link, just again, so they'd have it. And there is the video on paced bottle feeding is included in there. I checked.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Can you pull out your S1 again and show my friends where the charger goes?
Yeah. So there is this and this is where the charger goes. So again, your tubing is going to go right in the front here and on the side, and it actually says like 12 VDC. So this is where you plug your charger in, right on the side there.
And then can you talk about, you mentioned there's a learning curve with the LV. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I certainly can. So with the LV, and let me just show you the difference between like a regular flange and, so with a flange like this, I can see what your nipple looks like. I can see that your nipple is placed well in here. I can see what this looks like. I can see when it's pulling. I can see that your nipple is aligned perfectly in here. So we can tell that this is a good fit, that everything is going well. When I put the LV on, I cannot see where your nipple is placed. I cannot see if it's aligned in the middle. I can't tell if it's rubbing. I cannot tell anything. And so it can be really difficult. Like on the inside here, there's lines that will show you like, oh, you should align your nipple right in here. So oftentimes you have to lean forward and then put your nipple to align in here and then pull the, so you'd be like this, you lean forward, put your nipple in here, make sure it's lined up in the middle and then sit up. So I encourage you, if you have an LV or if you don't, if you're considering it, there's a bunch of Facebook groups. And as much as I don't love Facebook groups because they give really terrible breastfeeding information, the ones to do with like the LV I've sat in on a couple of them and they can actually be pretty helpful. So
Same with the Willow, yeah, they're pretty decent.
Yeah.
I love this question. What supplements do you suggest to improve milk supply?
None.
Right. Zero.
None. Absolutely none. I will tell you that it depends what year it is, what month it is, whatever it is that will say, when I had my son, all the pink drink at Starbucks was all the rage. I was a lactation consultant at the time and I'm like, we're going to try this. I can tell you that oftentimes it's just, you may be slightly dehydrated. So making sure that you are eating and drinking well is going to be the most important thing. Sometimes we can recommend some herbal supplements. Herbs are not my jam, but there are quite a few of our lactation consultants that can help with that. I don't ever recommend anything with, fenugreek in it just because it can also decrease supply. I saw somebody say Body Armor. That was another one too, like 4 years ago when my son was born. It was delicious. But honest and truly, like there's no evidence-based research that shows that any of these things are helpful. You just want to make sure that you are eating and drinking well.
Someone just said electrolytes. It all comes back to being hydrated. Really, it's the pink drink, the Body Armor, it's all about hydration and making sure you are drinking to thirst and eating well.
Yep.
And someone along those lines, someone asked about a diet that's good for breast
milk. You just eat whatever you want. There's no like great diet, I would say. I mean, you want to eat healthy. But certainly like when you're pregnant, there are certain things like you have to avoid. That is not true. The only things we usually recommend are like peppermint, like essential oils and things like that. Let's see. And then certainly you don't want to do drugs. Limit your caffeine and alcohol intake. And then cold medications are the only other things that we usually say to watch out for. So anything that contains pseudoephedrine, so like anything with a D, so like Allegra D, Claritin D, anything with a D is generally a decongestant. And when it's taken orally, it can actually dry up your milk. Usually nose sprays are okay because it targets just this area, but anything that you take orally can dry up your milk supply.
If baby is breastfeeding from one breast, can we pump the other one at the same time?
There's no need to, and it'll cause an oversupply. So if a baby only feeds on one breast, you can certainly collect the milk from the other side, especially if you're leaking. So, like Haakaa makes one that looks like a ladybug. There's like Milky's makes, milk catchers. I know LV just came out with one. There's a whole bunch of them on the market, but truly they're just designed to sit inside your bra or gently suction to your breast. It is not the same as like a Haakaa, but those are a great option to catch the milk, but we certainly would not recommend pumping on the other side.
Here is something right in your wheelhouse. If you have a baby that is sent to the NICU, would you start pumping right away? Would you continue pumping after that, even if you wanted to breastfeed once you can get back to baby?
So this really varies. I had a NICU baby, and the most important part is going to be set yourself up with as much breastfeeding support as you possibly can. So yes, you're going to start pumping or hand expressing immediately after the baby's born, not immediately, but like within a couple hours after the baby's born. And you're going to continue to pump every, 2 to 3 hours around the clock. And then once your baby is big enough and strong enough to come to breast, then certainly you can bring them to breast, but we'd still recommend that you pump. just because usually a preterm baby is not going to be as efficient at the breast as a term baby would be. So keeping that in mind. And then once, you are good, let's say your baby does get to breast, or maybe you're discharged and you're still pumping and they're just getting their feeds per like by bottle. You're going to work really hard with a lactation consultant to get your baby to breast. Doing a ton of skin to skin is important. But certainly if you do have a NICU baby, I highly recommend taking advantage of all the lactation support in the hospital that you can get. And then once you're home, getting support there as well.
How long should we wait after using medicines? I'm assuming they're talking about those cold medicines and things like that.
So cold medicines, we don't even recommend because it can decrease your supply overall. Every medication is different. So you're going to talk with the pharmacist. You can reach out to a lactation consultant just to make sure that they are okay to use while breastfeeding. And obviously the rules are different when you're pregnant. So medications that are okay during pregnancy may not be okay for breastfeeding, and then the other way around. So just keep that in mind. But you certainly, if you take a daily medication and it's okay to breastfeed with it, then there's really no reason to wait.
Someone asked, is pumping and dumping a thing?
Oh my gosh, no. I have a shirt that says end the pump and dump.
Yep.
It really, there are going to be some cases, like maybe for certain procedures, where you would have to discard your milk, or you'd have to hold off. It is really rare that you would have to dump your milk. I've probably only told one of my patients to ever do this, and it was because of some heavy medications that she was given after a procedure, and that was the only time I've ever recommended it. Normal, procedures, you certainly don't have to dump. You could, feed your baby before and then feed your baby after, as long as like enough time has lapsed. But I mean, if you're ever questioning it, you can reach out to a lactation consultant. Don't ever ask your provider, because they will always tell you to pump and dump.
Okay. Do I need to change my deodorant? I've seen people say don't use deodorant with aluminum.
I mean, nobody should use deodorant with aluminum, so that may be a good thing to do. Certainly it's hard because some of that does absorb into our system, and so we can be passing that to our baby. So we usually opt for like a more natural deodorant when breastfeeding. Sometimes if we use one that's really strong scented, it can kind of like deter our babies too. So the less we use that is like super smelly, then the better.
Do you normally pump around the clock if baby is sleeping through the night?
No. So especially, well, if you're exclusively pumping, you may need to include an overnight pump. But typically, if your baby is sleeping through the night, there's no reason to pump at night unless you're so incredibly uncomfortable that you need to take the edge off.
Someone said, I had gestational diabetes. My first baby was born with blood sugar levels on the low side of normal. She was given formula immediately after birth at the hospital. Does that hinder breastfeeding?
It can. Sometimes we get into this spiral where it's like, once a baby's supplemented, it's hard to move away from that supplementation. So if it is your goal to exclusively breastfeed, you're just going to work really hard to make sure you bring that baby to breast as often as possible, and then be working really closely with a lactation consultant just to make sure that like we can get away from that supplementation. In cases like this, I usually say in person is very valuable because we can do pre and post weights to make sure your baby's transferring what they need, and we can eliminate that supplementation.
Someone asked, I've heard you need to wake up your baby to feed every 2 to 3 hours. Is that true?
In the beginning, yes. So until your baby's back up to their birth weight, we do want you to wake your baby to make sure that they are gaining the way that they should be. Babies will typically lose weight in the first couple days. That is okay. And then we want them to start gaining. You will be waking your baby up in the beginning, but then as they get bigger and they reach that birth weight or 2 weeks, they will oftentimes give you a longer stretch. So maybe that 4 to 5 hour stretch in the beginning. And then it's typical for them to get back into that every 2 to 3 hours.
If you know you're having a C-section, will the hospital allow you to begin to breastfeed?
Yes. Absolutely. Your partner can bring that baby to you right after birth and place that baby skin to skin, and you can start breastfeeding.
Someone had asked about litter box duty, and I said, unfortunately, that rule doesn't apply once the baby's here. Someone said their husband is happy. He's happy to share that duty again.
I mean, we can lie. We can tell you don't do it.
Yeah, we can tell you whatever you need. Whatever the lactation consultants at HerSource said. And my doctor said it should be fine, but have you heard any negative things with Prozac and breastfeeding?
Um, I'd really have to look into that for you. So we have like a database for where we can check it. But typically if your doctor is saying it's okay, I had extreme postpartum anxiety. And so I am a firm believer that you need to be the best version of yourself to be the best parent. And so there are medications that were created for a reason, and the majority of depression and anxiety medications are compatible with breastfeeding. So you do not have to compromise here. Your mental health is incredibly important to being a good parent. So just keep that in mind.
Someone asked if regular diabetes hinders breastfeeding.
Um, I mean, it can, especially if you are insulin dependent. So that is something that I would set up a one-on-one with one of our lactation consultants about. But yeah, it can. Sometimes we see like a delayed onset of your, milk coming in and things like that. So it is something you'd probably want to set up a one-on-one for.
Same thing. I had a couple of teachers just ask about finding time to pump. And I think it's incredibly helpful to set up those one-on-ones to kind of figure out your individual schedule. I had a mom that I met with a couple weeks ago who sent me her prep times and her schedule, and we figured it out exclusive to her. So I think it's super helpful. I know we say 2 to 3 hours, but every schedule is different. And when you get that free time, so that would be beneficial to do that one-on-one. Someone asked about cost, insurance. Some insurances are really phenomenal. Cigna is unlimited. Some like Aetna are a max of 6. So just reply to Allison's email and she can kind of dig into that with you.
I can look it up for you. But like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas will do unlimited. Cigna is great. United is great. Aetna does put a cap on it. But these should all be covered by your insurance.
Will the hospital LC help me set up a schedule if I want to exclusively pump?
They can. Yeah, I imagine they can. A lot of times they'll encourage you just to put the baby to breast just in those first couple of days, just to get that colostrum. And then you can start pumping from there. But if you are planning on, exclusively pumping, I would make sure you have that somewhere, maybe in a birth plan or something like that, so you can provide that. And then just ask them to give you a pump in your room right away and you can start pumping.
There's another really good one. Litter boxes during pregnancy. Nope, avoid those. Thoughts on placenta encapsulation, if it can help with supply.
So the last research that I read, and maybe you've read more than me, Tana, but we don't recommend it because of like the hormones that are in it. It can decrease your milk supply overall. So it does not increase your milk supply. From my understanding, it can decrease it. So we don't recommend it.
Should I still breastfeed if I feel sick? I remember you said our milk changes for our baby or if someone is getting sick.
Yes, I remember having the stomach bug, and my husband literally, I was sitting on the bathroom floor and my husband brought me my breastfeeding pillow and sat on the floor and held my son there because I was like super weak and did not feel comfortable enough to hold him, and held him there because for one, my son never took a bottle, but two, it was so important that he got those antibodies to protect him against getting that stomach bug. So
someone asked about pump accessories, nursing bra and breast milk cooler covered by insurance. That would vary per insurance. Reach out to your specialist. This is one of my favorites here. Since it's recommended for us to wait until 4 to 6 weeks to start pumping, are we not able to share feeding bonding until then? My husband wants to help, but I'm not. But if I'm not recommended to pump, I'm not sure how he can.
Oh my gosh. So partners can bond in so many ways. They can do skin to skin, which is amazing. I hated giving baths. My kids were super small and slippery. And so my husband did bath time. And so that was his thing. They can snuggle, they can read books. When I used to teach this in the hospital, I'd be like, they could play video games, like whatever it is that they think is like their way of bonding with the baby, is certainly a way to bond. You do not have to feed a baby to bond with a baby. So just keep that in mind. If it's for reasons that like you need a little bit extra sleep, then certainly, we can talk about that. But, if it's just in terms of bonding, like babies bond with other, with people in other ways other than just being fed.
Do I need to buy colostrum syringes? I keep getting ads for them.
No, That's just a great way of trying to get you to buy something.
Right, exactly. There's so
Great
many,
marketing.
right? They know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does delayed cord clamping help with baby's birth weight? What are the benefits of cord clamping?
So not with birth weight, but it allows to get that really nutrient rich blood to your baby, and it helps decrease the risk of iron deficiency. So usually by the first year of life, most kids are iron deficient and have to have some sort of supplementation. So like iron supplement, but allowing that cord to pulse gets that iron rich blood into them, and then they're less likely to need that.
Someone asked, I saw the pumping accessory for extra long adapters to sleep while you're pumping. Do you recommend?
No.
No.
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look for that one. It'd be really hard to sleep while you're pumping. I know the Willow advertises that you can lay down with it
When
if
you
you're
use
using the bags, but oh, somebody put it in there. Tana, copy that so I can check it. But yeah, no, I mean, you can't be like laying back while you're pumping. Like we want gravity to work, so we want to be sitting upright. I've never, I mean, certainly if you fall asleep while you're sitting up, then that's fine, but I've never heard of that.
it allows you to pump while lying down. It's super long tubing is what it looks like, and then connects. It's like an extra adapter. Yeah, pumping is 15 to 20 minutes. It's
Mhm.
not, you're probably not
Yeah.
going to get any really, really good sleep that way.
Yeah, I saw cord clamping. How long? Any delay is better than none. But typically you can say, I want to pulse, like the cord to pulse until it's white, or we can put a time on it. So, we usually say around 5 to 10 minutes is ideal.
Are babies likely to be iron deficient if we are during pregnancy?
No, I don't think there's any correlation. And then I saw, is it 15 to 20 minutes per pumping? So total. So if you're pumping both breasts at the same time, it's 15 to 20 minutes total. If you're only pumping one breast at a time, then certainly yes, 15 to 20 minutes per breast. But the idea is that you want to pump both breasts at the same time.
Lots of question about leaking colostrum. Will I have enough if I'm already leaking? Does this mean I'm going to have a solid milk supply? All of that stuff.
So I will do this last question and then I got to hop off. I teach another class right after. But there's no correlation between leaking or not leaking during pregnancy and having any indication of your supply. So if you're leaking, great, you can store it. But you certainly, it does not mean that it's taking away from your milk supply or that you'll have a ton of milk when the baby's here. And then on the flip side, if you're not leaking during pregnancy, it's not a sign that you're not going to have milk at all.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
These were such great questions. I love when there's people that are asking questions and it's like a very interactive class. You guys are awesome. You will get that resource list from me. I will send you an email shortly after class today. You're welcome to reach out to me. I can set up a one-on-one with, I know Tana and I have very crazy schedules right now, but if you can't get in with one of us, there's about 20 of us that I could set you up with. So, but I'm happy to answer any of your questions. If I didn't get to it, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to get in touch with you. I'll answer those questions for you. Or if you want to set up a one-on-one, then just look for that email and just email me back.
All right,
I wish
guys.
you guys the best of luck. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.